I'm Dr. Bill Wyatt, and I'm a general dentist, but I've been practicing nothing but orthodontics since 1970, and I'm a member of the American Orthodontic Society. This is a society of general and pediatric dentists who are dedicated to teaching other general and pediatric dentists or any other dentist orthodontics. We have board certification. We have our own journal. It is a very efficient organization for teaching. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Bill White, and I'm going to talk to you some this afternoon about the difference between bands and brackets. There's a whale of a lot of difference in banding a case and bracketing a case, and people have asked me about that, so I thought I would just show a banded case and then a bracketed case and tell you the difference and talk to you about it and show it to you, and you kind of anybody that's interested in that. A lot of people, well, the younger people, have never seen banded cases and everything, and that's good, really. And it would be good if you knew what they are and what the blessings of having brackets are. It would make you feel better about the bracketed cases and everything. So I'm going to talk about two of these cases, and this one right here is going to be a bracket case, and it's a young man, and we kind of jump over the orthodontic problem, but he's got just a little bit too much facial height in the lower part of the face, so you wouldn't want to increase this much if you can keep from it, and we can certainly keep from doing that. We're not going to move him around much. Now, either he had some bicuspids extracted a few years before, or a year or so, or I don't think that I did that, but it kept his vertical height of the face down some, even though he probably had some functional problems. I'm not sure about that part of it, but let's look at the models now, and it's a definitely low angle case. I mean, it's really low, and his lower jaw is locked back now. He doesn't have any TMJ problem, but many people do, and they can't move their jaw. They can't bring their jaw out, so that was two of these more serious adult cases that I have shown in there. So anyway, this is a real low angle case. And when you went to start low angle cases back when you had bands, they had an advantage. In other words, you could put the bands with your brackets on them on the lower teeth, and when you bit down, you would stop. In other words, you were using the brackets for a bite plate, and the brackets were on bands, which you very rarely ever knocked the bracket off of the band, but sometimes a person would chew that off. But that leaves you this problem of contacting out in this area to start with, and not contacting in the molar teeth, but you put the load on the condyle back here in the back of the mouth. I mean, the back of the head back in here. You put the load here, and then it would be on the condyles on each side of the fossa back in here. You would have the load there. Now, if you've got bad joints and you did that, you would tend to have problems, because you bite with 10 pounds of force out here, then you're going to have about 25 back in on the joint. So people with bad joints had a problem there that you don't have with brackets, where we put a bite plate up there, and then you have to come in and put something on the back of the molars to support that, you would have to do that. Really, with brackets, you have to put a bite plate, and you still have the trouble with a bite plate you would have with them biting on the brackets. So that's maybe a little confusing to you to start with. Now we look at the side. This is perfectly class 1. That's a good class 1 relationship. But in the anterior, it's a class 2 division 2 part. So we're going to pick this up with intruding arches and bring this down with intruding arches, and this is going to level this thing out some. Well, just putting the bands on did a lot. Now you don't think about it, but when we banded cases, we put separators between every tooth. I mean, a big separation you got to have in there to go in. So that changed this whole thing, just putting the separators in. You'd put those separators in maybe 2 or 3 days, or maybe longer than that, sometimes a week, before you banded the case. And so the whole case is changed before you ever start the thing. So that's not a good thing. In brackets, you start where they are and you finish it to what you want it to be, or what the parents look at it and say, this is good. And then you can tell them, well, you're going to get what you see. And when you take the brackets off, there's only change. I do put molar bands. There'll be a little change here, but not like it changes when you take the whole bands off the teeth. And I just wanted to bring that out. Now look at the other side of the mouth, and it's class 1, 2, not quite as good as the other side, but we've got this deep bite. And so if you have a class 1 case and a deep bite, you've got to have a lot of crowding in lower anterior teeth, or else these lower anterior teeth have moved back. You see, this gap is much less than this gap up here. And these teeth have leaned back in like that. Okay, when we start the case, just putting the separators in changes this whole thing. And you got a pretty good space between all the teeth. And part of this space will close up when you put the separators in here. So you don't think about that. And that was one thing we had to deal with. When you're banding a case, you've got to separate it several days before you start to get separation enough to get the band on the teeth. And you've got two pieces of metal and 2 layers of cement between each tooth in here. And you don't think about that. Well, we thought about it, but and you've got to have a pretty good space. Not that wide, but for the metal is thin and the cement is quite thin, but they do add up. And you go with all these spaces in between here and put that much material between them, then it's a lot of difference in those teeth when you start to do the orthodontics. And so that's, in some cases, might be a little bit of advantage not having to put a bite plate on the case, but you would have to suffer otherwise. So anyway, and then when you look at it, the upper have kind of folded backwards. In other words, they've come back this direction. I think we've got our little marker is off here. Let me get that back on. Okay. Now, we banded this case, and you look at it and say, hey, well, that's not as bad as you thought. Let me go back and show you where the model was now. It was down here, and we just put the bands on, and now the upper teeth are up here, see? They're like that. Now, I have to bounce this back and forth. But before you really I don't think our intruding wires were that fast, but you couldn't close this down to here because of those brackets on the lower anterior teeth. So that was a bite plate on many, many cases. People didn't even think about putting bite plates on back when everything was banded like that. All right, on each side now we put 2 intruding wires. This doesn't go all the way around, but it's just the same way. When this wire goes up here, we pull it down, it tightens this spring, and it's lifting this up. And this particular one, I just cut this wire. You don't have to do that. You can just run the wire and have a flexible enough wire that'll go in like that. And then you raise this front section up. Now down here we went in and put this on top of these, and it's carrying these down. This is carrying these up, and we're getting the force from right here in these 6-year molars. So for this to push this down, this has to be pushed up with the same force. Absolutely, exactly the same force is trying to push this molar up, is pushing these teeth down. The one that's pushing these teeth up is going to push this molar down. And everybody, if you're going to do orthodontics, you really ought to understand and know that. And these teeth move very little on nearly everybody that chews good. Now, if somebody is swallowing improperly and not biting their teeth together when they swallow, in other words, their tongue thrusters and their infantile swallow pattern, their teeth don't get pushed together good, this will lower these teeth and raise these, and whatever this goes down and this goes up, you can add that up. That's going to open the vertical dimension of the face, and you open it a millimeter or so back here, it'll open 2 or 2.5 in the front out here. So you add length to the lower third of the face, and if you add very much, it is not a good looking thing to stick on anybody. So people doing high angle cases have to be very cautious of that. All right, now there's more to the difference than you think. So here's the other side of the mouth, and so we went through this procedure. We leveled this out. I used a lingual arch back then, but you don't need to, and never do. I haven't used one now for years, and you don't need to use a lingual arch. It's not a lingual arch, it's just a lingual wire, holding it, or you could call it a lingual arch. I don't use them at all anymore, but we did at first to try to keep that thing in line. So here it's 1977, I see, and we're going through this thing, and there's the intruding wires on, and it's pushed these teeth down a little bit, but not much. The mesial of the 2 molars, the bottom one's going to lean back this way, and the top one will lean this way too. And that throws the mesial corner of both teeth is going to hit. And so they chew on that, and those teeth don't move, or they don't move very much. And that's exactly why this Carrier appliance or whatever it is has a little gadget hooked onto the molar, and it goes out here and you hook a class 2 elastic to it, and it corrects the class 2 problem, and you don't have to pay much for it because the occlusion chewing those teeth holds those teeth in place. And I hope you understand that. But they made a nice little appliance. It's really polished and good, and so people pay big prices for them. You could stick a big daddy arch in the headgear tubes up here, where class 2 elastics, they do almost the same thing. Or they would do virtually. You correct your class 2 with it. All right, here we're going to open this completely, and then we pull the space together, and you use elastics, whatever is necessary, to keep it class 1. You keep the interdigitation where it is. If it goes one way too much, you can wear class 3 elastic would be coming down this way, or class 2. Usually it's just class 2 elastics. Close the space up, and you end up with the cases in class 1, and they'll have the open bite. Here's a picture of that tooth now that after this has been working. You see it's prizing this tooth up like that. So you see the tooth, it's tilting a little this direction as it goes down, but then the occlusion is right in here, and anybody that chews good, this tooth that you're using, a 6-year molar here, will not move very much, and you can intrude the whole blooming front of the mouth working off of this tooth right here. And we do that all the time, and it works. And so now let's see, we get it up here high enough, and we're going to move it forward, and we'll just go through the regular orthodontics. That's we cover that in so many places you won't need it too much. So we go through it. So here's where it was to start with, and there's where we ended up. We just brought it up and brought those teeth back, and you see they're tilted down like this here, and here they're tilted normal or pretty close to normal, except when you've got bands on teeth. We had this problem. You had to put more torque into the teeth than you really wanted, because when you closed all the space, the torque would reduce. Excuse me. These teeth could stand a little more torque, but I didn't torque them far enough, and when I took the bands off and closed the space, they looked like they could stand just a little more torque. In other words, they could be tilted out this way just a little bit, and it would look a little bit nicer in there. Now this is an extraction case, but this young man could stand it, and it did not cave in his face. So here he is in 1979, and we started, I think, in 77 or something like that. We put a retainer up above, and retainer has a bite plate. We put this bite plate, and he wears it, and his lower teeth fit in this, and it can't lower if he wears that bite plate. It'll stay that way the rest of his life, but he should wear it for quite a while before he tries to take it out. Now this is not dished in. To me, it's a nice face. The facial height is quite good, and so this is a banded case. And it kind of went through some of the advantages and some of the disadvantages, and one of the main disadvantages was that you had to over torque the teeth while you were in the bands. And when you took the bands off and closed the band space, and we did that with a rubber band from one molar to the other, a real light rubber band, and you had to put a little dot of acrylic on there, and you put a groove in it, and you wore that rubber band about 2 or 3 days, and I had them chew all the time. They could chew bubble gum or anything, and just really mesh the teeth together, and you'd close those spaces up in 2 or 3 days, and man, when they got back in, if the spaces were closed, you took an impression, and you just said, oh God, I hope this stays like it is. Now that's a disadvantage to do that. With brackets, I can put them exactly where I want them to be, and I can get the parents in there, and they can look at it and say, do you like it like this? And if they like it and the person likes it, then we go with it that way. And if they gripe about it, I say, well, you looked at it and it is like it was when we took it off and put that in there. So that's a a big advantage with brackets, and I really appreciate that. I appreciate you watching, and we'll close this out now, and I'll say goodbye. I hope you will subscribe to our channel, and we enjoy giving these videos out, and I hope they do good wherever they land. So goodbye. Thank you a lot now.